Good afternoon, folks, and after a long couple weeks, welcome to another episode of Bear Dash. I am Jasper Sundin with the Daily Californian.
I'm Shailin Singh, also with the Daily Cal.
And we're here to talk about the future. So Cal's 2020 season is over. I don't think it was quite the 2020 season any of us imagined for plenty of reasons. Hard to know where to start. Actually, no, it's not hard to know where to start. Go check out Shailin and Emily's episode. It's a couple weeks old, but it really breaks down that season for you. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the future. The holidays are over. The United States is still intact. The sigh of relief. And please, I mean, as an aside, yesterday was crazy. If you missed it, maybe you're not living in America. I don't know. I don't like to make assumptions, but please think of this as a way to take your mind off it, at least for half an hour. Stay focused on it. Keep your hearts there. Do the right thing. But yeah, this is a nice aside. Think about Cal football for at least a little bit. We're in the off season, but as we in Berkeley know, Cal football never really turns off. But the holidays are over, so we'll be looking at the NFL, specifically the NFL draft, changes to Cal's starting lineup, which are obviously going to occur as players leave and make their own futures. And then we'll talk about the class of 2022, which just picked up its first recruit. First of all, though, Shailin, I mean, from now until the NFL draft, this is going to be the big headline. This is going to be the big story. Which Bears are headed to the NFL? Give us some thoughts. Break it down.
Yeah, so last season, Cal had 3 players drafted. None of them have really taken on major roles in the NFL yet, but Ashton Davis got some playing time with the Jets, and there's a couple other players. Jalen Hawkins got a lot of playing time with the Falcons. Evan Weaver didn't actually make a roster, but he'll get a shot next year. He's still with the Cardinals. He's with their practice squad now, and he'll be with their training camp and have a chance to make the team next season. But this season, Cal's probably not going to beat that 3 players drafted level, but there are a few players who are currently declared and a few players who are still on the fence. So as of now, we have Cam Bynum, who originally planned to leave early and go to the league, skip this season, but when the Pac-12 brought football back, he came back as well. So he's declared. We knew that. That was not a surprise at all. And other than that, we have Zionde Johnson, a defensive end, and Jay Curran, an offensive tackle, who both declared within the past week, I believe. And their draft stocks are interesting, and we'll talk about that. But other than them two, there's a few key players that we're waiting on to make their decisions. And the 2 biggest names to watch for me are Cam Good and Coin Dang. And before we start talking about the players who actually did declare, I want to ask you what you think their chances are of declaring. Because me personally, I think Cam Good is more likely of the 2. He's put together a few quality seasons. He's been one of the best linebackers in the Pac-12, if not the nation, over the past 2 seasons. Whereas Coin Dang, he's been good when he plays, but he's really only played 1 full season of D1 college football because he was a JUCO transfer. So he has so much potential left, and he can also improve his body a bit more. But those are the 2 guys who, if they declare, they're definitely both getting drafted. But, I mean, all we can do is guess right now.
Yeah, that's really all any of this is, but it's nice to speculate on it. It as Shailin said, it's you can definitely mark your books. A Cal player will get drafted this year. That there is no doubt. The only question is how many. Cam Good and Coin Dang are interesting because they're in 2 very different situations. Cam Good had a fantastic season. It was only 4 games, but he was amazing. Second team All Pac-12. Which I think was criminal. I think he was one of the best outside linebackers in the Pac-12. Not just on a statistical level, he put up some great numbers, but he was also just, I feel like every time you were looking for a big play, every time it was close, every time it was critical. I mean, you think about that Oregon game, Cam Good was the guy out there making plays. He was in the thick of it. He was recovering fumbles, making sacks, making tackles. I mean, he just did not make errors. He was incredible. And that's after a 2019 season where he had like the same type of numbers. He had the same type of play. He was just really good. And I don't think he's quite gotten the acclaim he deserves for that. You don't see him rising up NFL draft boards. In fact, you don't see him being talked about a lot in terms of the NFL draft. He's not a guy who's getting his name thrown out there. For that reason, I could see him staying an extra year and just cementing that. I mean, he's kind of had a season and a half where he's played really well. There have been injury concerns. He's managed to avoid that. That's also something on the flip side, right? If you've had injury concerns, you want to get into the league. You want to book that while you're healthy. But
get that paycheck while you can.
Exactly. Especially now. Now is the time to get the bag. But if he doesn't get that acclaim, if he doesn't rise up draft boards, there's a real incentive for him to stay here and just show what he's already been doing and make sure everyone's looking. Koindang is different. Like you said, he hasn't played a lot of football, and he had poor games last season. I think he got a lot better as the season went on. He was great against Oregon, but he struggled a little bit. He was not as quick as he could have been in coverage. He was a bit anonymous in those first couple games. And I mean, in a 4-game season, that's like half your sample size. So it's tough to tell. But he's highly acclaimed just because of his build, his athleticism, the fact that he can play both inside and outside linebacker. A lot of people just look at him and know that just because of the way he shapes up that he's going to be a great football player. He has the length to do it, the speed, the tackling ability. He forced a couple fumbles last season. And so he's, I think, viewed as much more of a raw recruit. But he's much more likely to be drafted just because his name is one that scouts have been looking at for a while, and it's one they know. So Good and Koindang are both in kind of opposing situations, I guess. But I'd be a little more surprised. I don't know. I think they can both stick around for their own reasons.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either way for them. And there's a few other people who could go either way. Someone like Elijah Hicks, Josh Drayden, Mike Zaffel. Those are all guys who their draft stock isn't necessarily probably where they want, but they're also getting a little on the older side in terms of how long they've been at Cal. And it was the same thing for Zionde Johnson, who we're about to talk about. But I mean, he didn't really put up the numbers that are considered for like a draftable player, but he would have had to come back for his 7th season if he wanted to. And that's just like, at that point, scouts will start docking you for your age because, I mean, football is a very demanding sport, and you can only take so much wear and tear on your body before you're out of the league and you can't play anymore. So we can start with him. I mean, he was at Cal for 6 seasons. He only played in 4 of them because he redshirted his first year and he had a significant injury later on. But in his Cal career, he notched 59 tackles, 9.5 tackles for loss, and 5.5 sacks. So obviously, those stats do not jump off the page at all. I mean, a lot of defensive linemen who are going to get drafted in 2021 get those types of stats in 1, maybe 2 seasons. But he's been a great leader off the field, and he's a serviceable starter in the Pac-12. He's kind of like a jack of all trades, master of none type guy, which isn't necessarily a great thing when you're trying to get drafted because a lot of scouts do look for that potential in a certain area. And I don't know if he necessarily has that. Me personally, I doubt he's going to get drafted, but I do think he's good enough to get a training camp invitation. He'll get his shot, and there's plenty of undrafted players in the NFL, so you can't really count him out.
Yeah, and as a lot of people know, Cal has a history of producing players that I don't have that same type of potential from the outset. Maybe don't get the same type of look that other players from around the Pac-12 or around the country might get, but that go through the undrafted process, sign that contract, and then go on to make an impact. You can think of Patrick McCarry, who's in the league right now with the Ravens. Lorenzo Alexander is a name a lot of people know. Zionde has that same potential. Like you said, he doesn't jump off the page as someone who's going to get drafted. I can't say I've seen him on a lot of draft boards, but he definitely has been a great performer for Cal. And he's also, like you said, a great leader. People talk a lot about intangibles, right? Things you can't really quantify. Zionde has those. I mean, very charismatic guy. He's fun to talk to. He's fun to be around. And those are things you can't train into someone, right? You can't practice that. You're either a team player or sometimes you're not. And Zionde definitely is. He's a guy who's, I think, led this team, and especially this year when the defensive line was ravaged by injuries and COVID-19 absences. I mean, he stepped up. He was there. He was ready to play. He got his team out there, and those aren't things you can really buy. And Zionde has a lot of those. So, like you said, even if he doesn't get drafted, which I agree, I don't think he will be, he deserves that undrafted contract, and he definitely deserves to get a look somewhere in camp and have a chance to prove himself and prove that he's a valuable member, or he can be a valuable member of any NFL team.
Yeah, and with Zionde and also Jay Curran. It's hard, a lot harder to analyze linemen and figure out their draft stock because a lot of what they do does not show up in the box score. It's more an eye test. I mean, some of the best defensive linemen in football generate pressure, but you're not going to see it as a tackle for loss, or you're not going to see it as a sack. But if you can disrupt the pocket and force a quarterback to scramble or throw the ball away, I mean, those things are never going to show up if you just check a box score. So, I mean, a lot of this is kind of just like us guessing based on what we've seen, but we haven't watched every offensive lineman or every defensive lineman in college football. So it's a bit hard to compare when you don't really have those stats. But Jay Curran is a guy who's been very good in the Pac-12. He was honorable mention all Pac-12 in 2019 and 2020. Being a great tackle in the Pac-12 doesn't necessarily translate to the NFL because there's a lot of those SEC guys who are generally better suited for the size and speed of the NFL. But Jay Curran did get a Senior Bowl invite, and I'm super excited to see how he matches up against some of the nation's best pass rushers. And I really think that's his chance to show scouts that he is a draftable player. And if not that, again, that he's good enough to get a training camp invite.
Yeah, I mean, he's also a guy that's managed to stay really healthy the last couple seasons. I think he's played in over 40 games. He started over 40 games for the Bears. That's not insignificant. I mean, you get into the league, you don't want your starting tackle injured all the time. You don't want your backup tackle injured all the time, especially. I mean, you want guys who can stay healthy, and Curran has proven that. He's the guy who stays on the field. He missed a couple games this season, and that was due to COVID-19. Players are much more than their bodies for sure, but Curran's body is definitely held up. I mean, he's been there every step of the way, and that's been really valuable for a Bears O-line that's, been tremendously impacted by injuries throughout Curran's time here. I mean, he has been a rock just in his presence and just always being there, and that's not something you should be discounting, especially if you're an NFL team, because you don't want your starters to get injured, but think about that. That goes all the way down the line, right? You don't want the backups to get injured. You don't want the guys who are in training camps to get injured. You want them to be there. You want them to be healthy, and you want them to be producing for you. And Curran's that dude. And again, like you said, it's hard to just quantify how good an O-lineman is. Like, those numbers don't exist. They don't have stats for that. But Curran's been around. He's put in the work, and he's constantly getting honorable Pac-12 mentions. I mean, he's been very consistent and very healthy. And I think those things bode well for him in his future career.
Yeah. And I think we have to talk about Cal's draft gem. We've talked a lot about his draft stock before, but Cam Bynum did it again this season. The coaches voted him first team All Pac-12. I was a bit surprised by that. I thought he had a great season, but there were some fantastic cornerbacks in the Pac-12. But, I mean, he deserved it. He has big things in store for him. He says his biggest goal is to improve his 40 time, and I expect most of what he's going to be working on from now until the draft in April, or until the combine, I should say. It's just all those combine drills, because we know he has the intangibles, he has the football IQ, he has the technique. It's just his athleticism and specifically his speed that might worry some scouts. But he's another guy who accepted his Senior Bowl invitation, and just, I'm super excited to watch those man-to-man drills, watching him go up against some of the best receivers in the country, because all we get to see is Pac-12 receivers. And don't get me wrong, the Pac-12 generates a lot of the NFL's best receivers in the game. But watching Cam Bynum go against guys from the SEC and the Big Ten is going to be super fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, we've known this since before the season started. Cam Bynum was always going to be the guy. Last year it was Ashton Davis. This year it's Cam Bynum. He's the guy who's going to get drafted. He's a top 100 prospect according to ESPN. I think if he past the third round, it would be a shock to everyone. He's just, like he said, super intelligent, a great player, a great playmaker, has a nose for the ball. He's an integral part of that takers unit. But he's also, just another great guy to be around. I mean, Cal is talking, but we've talked to Cal coaches about this in the recruiting. They're looking for guys who fit the program, guys who want to work, and guys who are here to succeed. And Bynum is that guy. I think we talked to him when he first declared for the draft, and he said the thing he was going to miss the most this season was the workouts, was the early morning grind, was his teammates. He's, such an outstanding and happy guy. And to find someone like that who's there to work is just so rare. Not only is he good, but he always wants to get better. And at the professional level, I don't think you can ask for much more than a guy who's going to get up there and work his tail off, no matter where he's slotted in. Yeah. I think he's going to succeed no matter where he ends up. I do have a question for you, Shailin. Exactly how many Cal players do you think will be drafted this year? Before we move on to our latter half.
I'm going to go with 2. Cam Bynum's obviously a lock. I think he's going to be, like you said, probably around 3. If he can get his 40-yard dash into like the low 4.4s, I don't know if that's possible, but I think that could bring him up even higher. But other than that, I'm kind of banking on one of Cam Good or Coin Dang getting drafted. I don't think both of them will declare. And then if that doesn't happen, I think there's a slight chance Crahan could slide into round 7, but I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if it's just Bynum.
I wouldn't be surprised either. Last year was so uneven. We saw Weaver fall to the 6th. We saw Hawkins climb to the 4th. It was a crazy time. I could see up to 3 Cal players getting drafted, but beyond Bynum, it's hard to tell. But that's enough about the NFL. Let's bring it back to Cal football players who will be playing in Memorial Stadium next season. Shailin, we've talked about the guys who are leaving. Who's going to replace them? What are some position battles to watch out for? Bynum is a cornerback. Johnson is a defensive end. Curran is an offensive tackle. Who's going to step up to take their places now that they're well and gone for the NFL?
Yeah, so we talked about Bynum, so we might as well just stick with the corners. A big factor in this battle, too, is also what Josh Drayden decides, because he's been at Cal for, I think, 5 years as well. He can leave if he wants to. He's another guy who probably wouldn't get drafted, but would definitely get some looks in training camp. But what we do know is that Chigozie Anusi, assuming that Drayden leaves, is going to become Cal's number 1 corner. If Drayden stays, Anusi and Drayden will be the outside corners, which means there's probably going to be a new slot corner. Drayden has played both, but for me, the 2 guys next in line are Brandon Smith and Colin Gamble. Gamble was a true freshman this year, and he appeared in a few games, but didn't really take any significant snaps at corner. But I think he's Cal's nickel of the future. He's just got the exact kind of prototype body you like out of a slot cornerback. He's not the tallest player on the field, but he's really quick, really agile, and he's the type of player that Coach Wilcox loves to develop, and he has the athleticism, and once the technique is there, he can be just as good as guys like Drayden or Travion Beck, who both have been some of the best nickel corners in the Pac-12. And then Brandon Smith flashed a lot in camp last year. Obviously, we didn't get to see what he did in camp this year, and he didn't play much either, but he has a nose for the football, and he's also a guy who can play inside or outside. But Cal has made a reputation for their defensive back play, and it's gonna be super interesting to see who wins that battle through spring and fall camp.
Yeah, this is also a tough one to call because, like you said, we haven't seen these guys on the field, and now pretty much a year. And when I say on the field, I'm not talking about games. Sorry, I'm talking about in camp where they're getting a lot of reps, where we can see, your 3rd, your 4th string, these guys who are redshirting their seasons, where we can see them get reps and start to see how they're doing and how their play is coming along. So it's hard to just evaluate who's going to take over that position right now. Shailin tossed the name Brandon Smith out there, and I think he's definitely kind of next in line. But guys like Jalen Martin, Tariq Glenn Jr., and Tyson McWilliams are just – they're dudes we haven't seen a lot of. Cal has 2 new cornerbacks coming in. Caleb Higgins and Lou Magia-Hearns have both received various plaudits from the coaching staff. I think Higgins is the guy that stands out there. He's 6'2", 200 pounds. He already has sort of the body to come in, the height to match up well with a lot of those big Pac-12 receivers. Whether he does or not will entirely depend on the Cal coaching staff's evaluation. Lou Magia-Hearns is another member of that class of 2021 who's smaller, I think less recruited, but definitely has received his own share of praise from Wilcox and his staff. I think Gamble is the guy to keep an eye on, as well as Smith. Gamble, I think a lot of people were really high on him coming into the season. He didn't have that outstanding year, but it was only 4 games. It's hard to just get involved if you're a freshman. playing college football for the first time. Another thing, I don't think this is maybe a great possibility, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Elijah Hicks has played a lot of cornerback in his career. This will depend on whether Hicks leaves for the NFL draft, what his future looks like, whether he wants to continue to play safety, which is where he's at now. But Cal's a lot of depth at safety. Daniel Scott stepped up, and he very quietly had a very good season. Craig Woodson, I didn't have the same type of production, but he was on the field a lot. And as you said before, people are very excited for what he can do. I would not be surprised if Elijah Hicks, just with the wealth of experience he has at that cornerback position, slides back, just because the Bears have a lot more depth at safety right now than they do at cornerback. And moving Hicks around to that position just makes sense from maybe a roster standpoint. Whether that happens or not depends a lot, I think, on what Hicks wants to do, what this coaching staff sees out of some of their young players. But that's another possibility to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I could also see the possibility of Hicks playing both. I mean, that's Cal likes their versatile defensive backs, and Hicks, like you said, has experience at both, and they could rotate him. But there are a lot of names to keep an eye on. Moving to the offensive side, though, with Curran gone, it opens up an offensive tackle spot, which is obviously one of the most important positions in football. We've seen how bad Cal gets when they don't have Chase Garber, especially last season. So you want to keep your quarterback upright, you want to keep him healthy, and you need an offensive line to do that. But the unique aspect of this situation is that we saw a lot of the younger linemen play this season thanks to COVID, because multiple starters, including Curran, got pushed out because of COVID contact tracing. So guys like Braden Rome and Brandon Mello appeared in a ton of games. Rome appeared in all four, and Mello appeared in 3 out of the 4. And I think those are the two guys who can really compete to win that starting tackle spot. I mean, they're going to enter camp with a clean slate, but now that they have the in-game experience, I expect both of them to get first team reps throughout camp, and probably into the fall too. I think the coaches are going to want to keep up the competition on the offensive line and keep rotating guys in and out. But for me, those are the two guys who I think are in line to take that spot.
Yeah, I mean, offensive tackle, this right tackle position that Kern is vacating has to be the lowest concern for Cal fans. I mean, the Bears just have such a wealth of depth along the O-line. And that's a result, like you said, of injuries the last couple of years, actually. I mean, last season, there were some COVID absences, and it meant players had to step up. Brandon Mello was inserted. I think there was a point during the Oregon State game where McCade Matire, who's just a sophomore, he's got plenty of starting reps under his belt, 2 seasons worth now, but is just a sophomore, was the only starting O-lineman in the game. And the Bears performed. I mean, Garber's put up huge numbers that game. The Bears continued to be solid against Oregon. And this offensive line, despite its lack of experience in its youth, showed up. It was a trial by fire. It was the same way in 2019 when they were just loaded with injuries. I mean, that's when guys, dudes like Cindric, and they performed, and now they're in line to get starting minutes. So this isn't something where you want to be worried. I think maybe to the same degree that you should be about the cornerback position, or especially the defensive end position. The Bears have the depth here, but yeah, like you said, Brandon Mello and Braden Rome, they were the 2 backup tackles this season. They both got a lot of playing time. I think either of them could step up. Throughout this season, I think every time we've talked to Angus McClure, the offensive line coach, he has had nothing but praise for the guys he works with, and just talking about how they've all improved tremendously, and their work on the field shows that. But I said the defensive end position is the one to worry about. Zionde is vacating that. The Bears had trouble filling that out this season. There were COVID-19 absences, and the Bears were extremely thin there. Losing one of your most experienced defensive linemen is going to hurt you. Shailin, how are they going to fill this out?
Well, for me, there are a wealth of young, talented players on that defensive line coming in. You have Derek Wilkins and Akili Calhoun, true freshmen who could definitely push for some playing time. But me personally, I think we are going to have the lineup that was kind of supposed to happen this season, with Aaron Maldonado at nose guard, pushing Brett Johnson out to defensive end, and then J.H. Tevis, who played a lot of defensive end this year too. because obviously Brett Johnson couldn't play defensive end. He had to slide inside to nose guard because of Maldonado's injury. But assuming he comes back fully recovered, I think those are going to be the three guys that you see on the defensive line.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. J.H. Tevis emerged this season. I think he had a massive breakout performance. He was really good. Not perfect, but you think about his sacks against Stanford, he definitely produced, and he definitely showed up. And I think a way maybe not a lot of people expected him to. And that bodes well. He's the guy who's going to step in and replace Yonde Johnson at that position. He's the go-to name just because he performed well. The Bears are going to be pretty young at D-line. They have a couple guys coming in from their new class of 2021. I think Caleb Alarms-Orr is a guy a lot of people have their eyes on. Derek Wilkins is another guy who, again, just a highly rated prospect. It's tough to go from high school to college. It's a big jump. There's a lot of changes. So there's no guarantee that these guys can produce immediately. But it will be nice for Cal to get some extra depth there because, the Bears gave up over 200 yards rushing for their first two games of the shortened 2020 season. And a lot of that had to do with just the sheer thinness of the D-line.
Yeah, like you said, a lot of young players along that D line. But moving to even younger players, 2022 recruiting has already begun, and the Bears have already reeled in their first recruit. They got a commitment from defensive tackle Dominic Williams, who is a 4-star recruit on some platforms, 3-star on others. Nonetheless, a very talented player. What do you see in him?
Hey, first of all, this guy's name has given us fits, so I want to share that with all. It's a great name. We're not sure. Dominic, almost spelled like demonic, which, if you're a defensive tackle, being a little demonic is never a bad thing. Maybe he'll just scare the pants off opposing quarterbacks. We don't know. It's too soon to tell. He's still a junior in high school. So this guy's a ways out, but this is really significant. He's a 4-star recruit. Defensive lineman, first of all, like we said, you always need depth on the defensive line. You always want to be getting those guys. Cal didn't have that last season. It hurt them. This is just, again, a step in that direction. It's hard to relate depth now with depth 2 years from now. Those are just, in college football, that's a lifetime. But he's also just a highly rated prospect. And for Cal to get someone like that this early in the recruiting cycle shows how much of a job Justin Wilcox and his staff have done with recruiting. The class of 2021, or Cal's class of 2021, was ranked 25th in the country by 247 Sports. It could climb higher if the Bears can add another running back. I'll talk about that in a minute. But a couple years ago, this guy could have been Cal's top-ranked recruit, period. Now he's their first recruit. And that just says how much of a desirable location Wilcox and his staff have made Cal for student athletes. And it's a phenomenal job. But in terms of holes to fill, I think running back could be a big one, but that really depends on Byron Cardwell. He's a top 200 prospect. He's one of the best running backs in the country out of San Diego, and he'll make his commitment. He's a member of the class of 2021. He'll make his commitment this month. If he commits to Cal, I think that running back spot in their roster is full because they don't have any right now in the class of 2021. If not, that'll be a big need in the class of 2022.
Yeah, and it's also a bit harder to predict the 2022 class just because there are going to be a bit of weird movement the team is going to have to do in terms of their scholarships because of the 2020 season and the eligibility rules. Teams might not be able to take in as big of 2022 recruiting classes as they might like. But yeah, like you said, a lot of what happens in 2022 depends on how Cal's offensive players progress. You could have a ton of offensive starters who are no longer with the team in 2022, and there's going to be guys like Jamichael Sturdivant and Jermaine Terry leading the offense, but I would like to see Cal reel in a top quarterback prospect because Cal has two extremely talented NFL quarterbacks, possibly the best quarterback in the NFL at the moment, Aaron Rodgers. But they've offered 2 4-star quarterbacks for class of 2022 so far, and if they can hit on one of those, I think that's a huge deal.
It absolutely is. Quarterback is one of the most important positions It's been a while since the Bears have had a real out-and-out star. There's potential maybe with Garbers next season. He didn't quite reach that landing this year. There's potential with guys like Kai Milner, who are in Cal's last recruiting class. But, I mean, getting a good quarterback, there's nothing quite like that.
Yeah, and we don't have that much time. We're actually out of time to talk about this class. But, I mean, we're going to be talking about the 2022 class for months and months to come. And like you said, Cal is on an upward trajectory in terms of recruiting. This could be the first year since 2016 Cal reels in its first 5-star recruit. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, we'll have plenty more on that class in the coming weeks and months.
Stay tuned, folks. We should be back next week, but thanks for sticking with us for this one. Like I said, it's a crazy time out there. I don't know when it hasn't been a crazy time this last year, but here we are again. Democracy's under fire. Our politics are in question. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe. Keep the future in mind. And in the words of our good friend Justice de Los Santos, stay hydrated. Take care of yourself. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming to Bear Dash. And that's all, folks.